Nonetheless, I have some brief, if I can find it, some brief answers that he gave to some of the questions, and I'd like to share a couple with you just to give you that taste, and then I will free you from this sort of attention grab. And this maybe will clarify something. A precaution in regards to the style of non-philosophy. This is François here, talking to you guys and me. People often ask me to give examples of non-philosophy and accusing me of staying at the level of a program. They ask for examples of a non-philosophical life, of a non-mystical life. They want political examples of non-philosophy. And then first of all, I should tell you, most of my treatises aren't translated yet. We're trying to do our best, François. Give us time. More generally, these sort of questions tend to confuse non-philosophy with philosophy. And I think that's the hardest task of trying to even talk about it. It gets a little tricky. Non-philosophy is only empirically concrete via philosophy itself, which is included in non-philosophy, but merely at the simple state of materials. Non-philosophy is a formal discipline of the second degree without being a meta-philosophy. It is material and practical rather than empirical. I always reply that only the examples I can provide are my texts themselves, or those of others who have done work according to the same type of matrix. The program is the thing itself, non-philosophy, as underdetermined, but certain as being underdetermined, and in its dimension of fiction and utopia. This is an important part. For Laruelle, non-philosophy is always hovering with fiction and utopia. In the last instance, in a way that fiction can transform the world or the real. The generic posture of the set of utterances that form a non-mysticism or a non-theology or a non-aesthetic imply every possible mysticism, every possible theology, every possible aesthetic as the generic posture. And I'll get into that a little in a couple of weeks. But for him, what he calls ordinary man in 1985, he now calls generic man. And it's not in a way that things are generic and that's a bad term, but he's trying to underdetermine things, to take a little weight away from, say, philosophy with a big P or art with a big A, in order to underdetermine it, to liberate it for people's use. Again, in the last instance. So, I don't think I want to go any further. I think I've made you give me your attention long enough. But I also have some other questions, and we can ask questions too. There's some other inquiries because he's also linked with a movement called speculative realism. Some of you may have heard of. And he has a pretty definitive answer that no, I have nothing really to do with that. And I kind of got thrown into what he called that Noah's Ark. And he's constantly playing with religious metaphors. He's a jokester. But I'll leave it here. I think you've given me your attention, and I definitely have given you my attention. My cell phone's off. I forgot he was even here. You guys have experienced a non-workshop, or maybe a non-workshop. I'm not sure. But I thank you, and I hope that I've given you something to think about at least. And if you go back into his work and his future works, hopefully you'll keep in mind something from what I got at here, which is the big question, which is, can we save humanity? What is humanity? And in any case, non-philosophy is about philosophy and the defense of man, or the human, in the last instance. And I'll leave it at this. So, one question. Who is a non-philosopher? And he says definitively in the end, a non-philosopher is a fanatic of philosophy, hopefully in the best sense of the word, a fan of philosophy, and also someone who will defend the human in the last instance at all costs. It's very interesting. Very interesting project. So his science, in a way, maybe is a science of a sort of theoretical martial arts. I don't know. But nonetheless, he's quite happy to be coming in a couple of weeks. He will be able to do another sort of jousting. He'll definitely not give you a lot of straight answers, probably. I'm surprised that he gave me some of the answers he did that are actually quite good. But this was a sort of a theoretical experiment using materials here. Spinoza, which you can't see, but he's here. And Berardi. And this guy, Laruelle. Because the irony is, as I told Laruelle the other day, I said, you know, you don't have to be at this lecture. This is the one I promised to do. But you're going to be there because you're the material for it. So anyway, thanks for coming. I'll take questions. I don't know what sort of answers I'll be able to give you, but I'd be happy to do that. And the book that we just recently published called Struggle and Utopia at the End Times is a particularly interesting work. And the reason why we chose it, because it was written in 2004. And for Laruelle, it's a pretty interesting time. So 85, he wrote Biography of an Ordinary Man. 89, Philosophy and Non-Philosophy. Throughout the 90s, he did several other works that really were focusing on non-philosophy. And then in 2004, and then he went through a mysticism phase and some really weird stuff, which is fascinating. But Struggle and Utopia was his attempt to reevaluate this whole project. And so as a thinker, myself, that had seen how some people had jumped into the bandwagon of Laruelle by some of these speculative realists that either used him or then threw him under a bus. And I had read enough of his work already to realize he didn't have anything to do with that, I didn't think. I didn't think speculative realism was anything new. I thought it was just philosophy. And so I started reading his work a little bit more then. And so it was interesting to have him sort of verify that sort of hypothesis. But what he did in 2004 with Struggle and Utopia, and why I thought it was perhaps the text to sort of start bigger translations of this big text, was there are problems inherent in non-philosophy. And a lot of his French students or other colleagues that became non-philosophers, he thought the way they were using it, and again, as he would say, there are as many non-philosophers as there are non-philosophies, which is a much more difficult thing to think about if you really get into it than just saying it, is that there's a way that this sort of project of defending the human could go completely awry, and really in a bad way. And so that book is trying precisely to deal with how to get around that. And he addresses non-philosophy in a way that's very as clear as he can make it, and he addresses where it can go a little bit too far. And I would guess when that happens, at least from my reading of the text and from others, that typically it's a question of whatever they're trying to do falling back into the traps of a philosophy. So anyway, thank you for giving me your attention, and I thank you for allowing me to give you my attention. Thank you.